Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. So welcome to the Harvard community meeting. The agenda for today is we're going to be demoing the P2P work, the work that we did to deliver an integrated experience with P2P providers such as Uber, Kraken, Alibaba, Dragonfly. But before we do, I want to share something. Let me share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Great. So we have a couple events coming up. I think most people know that there's the KubeCon event coming up on the 18th, I believe. But before that, there's a Cloud Native Open Source Summit, Virtual Summit China 2020. Also, it's an online conference. So we have a couple talks. There's one on just a Harvard update, graduation project update by Henry. And all these talks are in Chinese. They're China time zone friendly. So please check them out if you have time. And then there's a deep dive on the 31st by Daniel and Stephen on Harvard 2.0 and some of the upcoming features in the Harvard 2.1. And then there's an application delivery in multi-cloud and multi-cluster by Henry, and Ming is also one of our maintainers. And then we have the KubeCon later on. Starts on the 18th. I think we have two tracks. We have two maintainer tracks. There's a Harvard intro and a Harvard deep dive. So please check these out if you have time. All right, Stephen, do you want to share the work that we did for P2P?
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Give me one. Hello, everyone. I'd like to, before we do the live demo, I'd like to use one slide to describe what's the core idea of the P2P per head. Actually, the core idea of the P2P per head feature in Harbor it's very simple. I think the main idea can be described using a diagram shown here. At the Harbor side, we'll support a per head policy. This policy will behave as an automation pipeline. That means in this policy you can create some filter or criteria to define which artifacts are qualified to trigger to do the preheat operation. So far, there are 5 criteria. First, you can use the repository pattern to define, which repository, at the repository level. You can narrow down the repository list, and then after that, you can also use a tag pattern to narrow down the tag list. After that, you can also to specify if we only want to, preheat the send image, and we also support the vulnerability. That means you can define, only the artifacts, without some, specified severity vulnerabilities, then they can be preheated. Also, you can specify the labels. So after you create this policy, specify the related criteria, then you can also define how to trigger this pipeline. We support, manually you can directly click to execute the policy. You can also set a schedule to periodically, trigger the policy, and you can also, set it as an event-based, because event-based here for event-based that means we'll watch the on push, scan complete, and on label 3 events. Each event will try to evaluate if the targeting artifact match the related policies, that policy can be started. Okay, yeah. After the policy, the output is will, if we have some artifacts to preheat, we'll send the preheat request through API to the supported P2P provider, and the P2P engines like Kraken or Dragonfly will check if the artifacts has already been in their cache. If not, they will start issue a pull request to the harbor and pull the content into its cache. So when the client started to pull the image from those P2P provider, I think they can directly start it because all the data pieces of the pulling content has been in the cache. If we don't have such a preheat, the first copy needed to connect to the upstream bridge and pull into its cache, so that maybe consume some time delay. So I think this is use this feature, you can plan your deployment. That means you can use this automation pipeline or use the preheat policy to specify when qualified artifacts can be put into the cache in advance. So because it's the deployment can be planned to reduce the first time pulling delay. So that's the main idea of the preheat feature. So let's start the live demo. Here I have a harbor, and yeah, after you log in as a system admin, you can see there is a distribution section under the administration. So as a system admin, you can navigate to this distribution to add a supported P2P ng instance in Harbor for for next connection. Okay, today I use Uber Kraken as a target P2P preheat. Give me 1 minute. Let's send them. Yeah, first you can click the new instance to add a P2P ng instance. So so far we support two providers. One is the Dragonfly, another is Kraken. I have a Kraken deployed on the NetEase cloud. So let me add this Kraken NetEase demo. Okay, and enable Scale just to do a test connection. Yeah, it's connected. For example, if you specify wrong, okay, there will be health check field. No detailed information for security consideration. Let's go. Okay, click OK. And now you can see we have a Kraken, and its status is health. So after let me add this P2P engine into the list, then any project admin can use this instance. So I will not switch any cloud because we can reduce some time. So I keep you under the admin account. So now you can go to your project. Here in your project, you can see a new tab, name it preheat. So under this tab, you can create any policy, preheat policy, to define which artifact you want to do preheat. And let's see what we have now. We have today I use the NGX repository. So we have several artifacts, some manifest some image, and they have been scanned. Okay. Let's back to preheat. First, let's create a policy. You can see here, you can, as a project admin, you have permissions to create a preheat policy, and you can see all the available P2P NG instance. So here we select our Kraken. Let me create Kraken schedule. I'll create several policy. First, let's create a scheduled one, and I'd like to only use NGX repository and use the 1.19 tags. I'll narrow down the scope to such artifacts, and you can see you can also create enable some criteria for example, a signature, severity, and the labels. For the scheduled, we only use the filters.
So quick question, Stephen, when you check only signed images, so signed images are replicated, can the signature still be enforced and replicated or preheated to the P2P provider or not?
Oh, yeah, if you checked this box, that means only send image can be preheated. That means your artifact should be, send, then they can be preheated.
I know, but is the signature maintained when the image goes to the P2P provider? Like we know that when you replicate an image from one harbor to the other, the signature is not maintained.
Yeah.
In this case, will the signature be maintained?
No, this criteria just used to determine, the preheat, the target preheat artifacts. So the signature cannot be, maintained at the P2P side.
It's the same thing as when you replicate to a different registry, right?
Yeah.
Signature is lost.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Yeah. So the signature is lost, but this is just a way to say,
because
it's a way to say if your image is not signed, don't replicate it, but nothing else. Got it.
Yeah. It's just a condition. Yes, it's just a condition.
It's a condition check, not anything else. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, let's first create a schedule preheat policy, and we can use the customize. Let's create.
Can you
3 minutes?
Can you also look at the trigger? Click on the drop down. I would like to see what options are there. Oh, it's manual. So if you click event based, is that pushed on push?
No. For event based, you don't need to specify. You don't need to specify the concrete events. We'll check the on push, scan complete, and on label. Three events. We'll automatically to evaluate
if it needs to be updated.
Yeah. If it matches the policy, yeah.
Oh,
so
we should actually.
This can be better worded.
Yeah, we should put a little question mark there to actually add what the documentation, what that means, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. After you create the event base, there will be information. I'll show the demo later. Okay.
No. But
first,
I'm just saying in the UI we should have information there what event base means. So
yeah, we have the information in the list, not in the wizard, not in the creation wizard.
Well, I mean, even here, it's not when I'm setting it up for the first time. It's not clear, right? Like to me, the first time user, I don't really know what event base means. But yeah, we can add something.
Okay. So let's first create a scheduled policy. Let's specify now it's UTC time. I think that's 3 minutes later.
Let's do 1 minute, right? Instead of
3 minutes, right? Yeah. It's UTC time. So let's okay, this will check the AJAX and 1.19 text, and it's scheduled. And you can see the time it's UTC time. I think it's 3 minutes later. It should be triggered. Okay, first let's create another one, like a menu. Also use NGX. Maybe we can use anyone. Okay. I'll create a manual policy to do the demo. Let's say for manual, you can actually for any type of the policy, you can trigger the etiquette besides their native trigger. That means any policy can be manually triggered, not just the manual one. Okay, let's see what will happen. Okay, there will be a execution created. Now it's running, and you can click to see the details. So now the only one artifact matched. It's the 1.18, and it's a digest. Let's see the details. Okay, it's connection timeout. Let's retry. See what happened. It's weird. Okay, this time it's a success. Actually, let's check what will happen at the backend. You can go to the access log. You can see there is a Kraken username to pull the use this digest to pull the resource. That means Kraken has got the request, and it has issued the pull request, and it's success. Okay, and let's back to say more policy. Okay, if now we can add more current here, for example, only sun, and for example, let's add a one by one. That may be more clear. This time we add only sun image. Let's see what happens. I don't think it should be preheat anything. You can see it's complete very quickly because no artifact to preheat, because the 1.11 is not it's not a send image. Okay. Let's see which one is send. All the artifacts only the 1.15 is send. Okay, this one only the 1.14 is send. So let's see what will happen. Let's check it to 114 and keep the signature criteria. You can see running. I think the 114 is matched, so it's preheating. Okay, so let's back to, let's see what, you can see the schedule has been issued. Okay, I just create a schedule policy after the 3 minutes. Now it has been issued. Let's check success. You can see we preheat 2 artifacts. All the information you can find here. There will real pull happen. Okay, so let's back to the preheat manual side. Okay, let's add vulnerability severity. Let's use a very low level. That means no vulnerability severity or low and above, can be preheated. Let's keep it. I think at this actual condition, there will be nothing preheated. You can say it's very quick because all the NGX artifact has high severity vulnerability. So if you use a low, there will be nothing to preheat. Let's adjust to the, let's adjust to the policy to, for example, critical, because critical, right? The artifact has severity high, but you said, oh, critical up can be preheat. So the NGX artifact can be preheat. Let's see what happened. Okay, you say it's matched this time. 1.14 is matched and trigger a preheat. I need to clarify here. If the artifact has been in the cache, even we send the preheat request to the P2P NG, they will directly, return. Okay, return success because the artifact you required to be cached had already there. So if what I mean, if the artifact is repeatedly preheated, okay, here we'll create the task, but actually from the P2P provider side, they will not issue duplicate pull request. So this is, because the artifact had already been there. Okay, we have another one is label. Okay, so if we add a label approved, I think this time if we trigger it, there will be nothing to be preheated because no, you can say 32 execution, no artifact. So preheat because no artifacts with the label. Let's add a label to this one. We add approved label to the artifacts 114, back to the preheat policy. Okay, this time matched, you can see our image or preheat happened again. So now we have 5. All of the criteria are, added. So that's this is all the condition we used. This is the manual trigger way. I think we show the schedule manual. Let's say I'll create a policy specific for the event-based. Event-based. This time I still use NGX and maybe I can create expand the scope, all the 1.1 tags, and let me say what we should. Okay, critical, because only critical can be real triggered and enable all the criteria. So for this policy, only the NGX and with the 1.1, 1.4, 1.11, 1.8, it's all okay. And but the should be sent and no vulnerability severity of critical and above, and also with the label approved. Okay. Actually, for matching this policy, there will be only one artifact in the demo candidates, in the demo data. It's we have so many, but only one have the 5 condition. This one 1.4, but let's see what will happen first. I'll remove the first. Now we have event-based, right? That means when the push happen or the scan complete event coming or label unlabel event happen, the policy will be automatically evaluated. If there is artifacts match that policy, the artifact will be preheated. Let's see what happened after we add a label to the one dot. Let me how to see. For example, let's use the non-matched artifacts. Show the fading scenario first. If you add a label to this one, let's back to the preheat, see what happened. And I think nothing will be preheat. Nothing happened. So let's back to the I think this one will match. Let's add a label. Approved. Okay. 1.14 has approved label and has no vulnerability, with the severity critical, and it's NGX, and yeah, and also it's a send. Okay, so let's back to the preheated policy, see what will happen. This one. Okay. Sorry. Let me check what happened. One critical approved. It's not show the result we are expecting. Give me 1 minute. Do it again. For example.
By the way, I have a question. So can you preheat images that are immutable, configured as immutable?
Sorry. Can you repeat?
Yeah, my question is, what happens if you try to preheat something that's configured as immutable through our immutable policies?
There are no immutability condition check. So.
I mean, what if the image
because
is
this
not
this
as a
is
condition, right?
Yeah, it's not a condition because this is a pull action. So I don't think the immutability will influence the P2P preheat operation. But we did not use the immutability as a condition at this moment. Okay. Okay, what's happened? Okay, I'll manually trigger it to verify. Okay, it's weird. It's matched.
Yeah, it might be a bug, but I think we understand the idea behind it. Is that there's a
yeah, I think that's event-based is the fancy part. It's weird. Approved.
So can we preheat an untagged artifact?
Yeah, that's a good question. So far, I don't think we support preheat untagged because the tag filter is required. You need to, at least you need to have a tag. You need to have the artifact has a tag. So if no tag, it will be filled to in the tag filter.
So what happens when you preheat a manifest list? The parent has a tag, right? But the image is within. Oftentimes.
Yeah, for the manifest, they will you preheat the prevent, and I think it depends on the the client use in the P2P network. That means the P2P which client they use. Yeah. It's weird. It should be work.
Steven, do you have a slide to introduce all the contributors for this feature? Do you want to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have one more point I need to mention is, as we have some security, configuration here in the project level. For example, the context trust, that means they check the signature of the artifact and prevent the vulnerability with some severity. So these two are similar to the preheat policy, right? To the similar conditions defined in the preheat policy. So the current principle is if a similar condition defined in your preheat policy are conflicts with the security settings defined in the project level configuration, will use the project level configuration to override, the settings you defined in the preheat policy. I think the typical cases, for example, if here you specified only, if the severity of critical and above, the image will be prevented from pulling, and in the preheat policy, if you specify very low, that means its conflict will use this one to instead of that one. For example,
Is there a reason
Well-
we design a new filter for preheat instead of reusing the replication? Why
sorry,
do
what?
they look differently? I find it very confusing. You allow user to set criteria here. How about the whitelist when you check in the criteria?
Sorry, can you repeat your question?
My major question is, why do we design a new filter for preheat instead of using like replication?
A new filter.
Yeah. Why?
Talking about why do you allow creating filters on the P2P provider policy?
Yeah. I mean,
versus
why
project
they are
settings?
different? Why? I mean, this feature looks quite similar to replication, and we have a very strong filter mechanism in the replication policy. So why
Yeah,
don't we reuse this?
good points. So I need to clarify. All the filters here is aligned with the, we use the similar
Yeah, but I understand. I
filter
understand the code
approach.
is the same, but why the criteria are different?
Peripheral, for example, which one? Repository tags. These are
For example, the signed or now the vulnerability setting. I don't think they should be there. Why
you
do
mean
we need them?
we introduce additional criteria to the replication?
We should just reuse.
I think the main difference or main consideration is the different scenario of replication and preheat. For the preheat, that means the artifacts you are, you are planning to deploy to your runtime, but the replication is not. Maybe replication is just a copy your artifact from one to one. So, as it's a deployment, it should be used very, more restrict condition to make sure the artifacts put into their deployment runtime environment are more secure. So that's a different consideration. Preheat is used for your deployment purpose, but the replication is used for your data, backup or data replication or data, copy. So that's different because the target environment. Replication, the target environment of replication is also in the registry, right? And you have other chance to make sure, the secure. But this one is, targeted into the runtime. They will use.
But there's already security policy at the project level that's preventing user from pulling. I think it's the same idea.
Yeah, it's the same.
Yeah, so you should reuse that one, I think.
So let me clarify. The last point I'm talking is these two, this one, the signature related and the severity related, will keep consistent with the project level settings. That means, for example, here, if you did not check the only send signature, only send image, but in your project level configuration, you enable the content trust checking. So we'll use that to override this settings. So that means the project level security settings will have high priority than those one.
Why
I
not
think
just reuse? Why not just reuse the setting in project?
Because your security may be not very risky, and here we can, define additional more security, more restrict. For example, in your project level, you just do a low level. That means low level above you can pull, right? But here I can define more, more restrict. Yeah, I said the different meaning. I mean,
So I
in
think
the product level,
I don't think that
you
makes sense. I don't
I
think.
think it's
product
always a
level,
trade-off between convenience and granularity, right? By doing it I mean, we did consider why not just directly borrow the project settings, but this way you have the ability to configure different deployment, mechanisms based on the provider. So the one for Kraken may be different from the one for Alibaba Dragonfly.
yeah, I
or
think the reason,
else in the
yeah,
future.
I think the reason is similar to the replication because you in the product level configuration you can set some very I think it's very not restricted, but I can here I can set more restricted, more limit, more security settings.
I don't think it makes sense. So let me ask you. So when you calculating the vulnerability level, do you consider the whitelist?
Of course.
I don't think it makes sense you create different policy at different project level
No,
because
this
it's
is
the
not
same
different.
person configuring the project security policy and P2P policy. If he set the vulnerability level to a certain value, that means he thinks this image, if it has certain vulnerability, it's okay to be deployed. It's the same person making the same decision on the same criteria. I don't think we need different.
No, I don't think so. That's
that's
the pooling is more wider than the preheat scenario. Maybe the preheat only target part of the environment, not all of the pooling, right?
So
your
you need
project level configuration is target very wide, pooling. That means maybe my testing scenario, my testing environment, my development environment, but preheat maybe target my production or staging environment. So I will use the very more restricted settings than the product level configuration. So we'll leave the flexibility for the user.
But that doesn't
I
make sense.
understand your case. I think the default is if you enable the two, you do not need to specify. You just leave. You do not need to set any value here, and we'll read. We'll use the project level settings. So you don't need it. But
I don't think your reasoning makes sense because it's also valid that the admin want to define a lower security scenario for the P2P network because my P2P network is for development only. Right.
Lower.
Yeah.
Yeah, less secure. But I think right now it takes the higher of the two, right?
Yeah.
Whichever is the higher.
I just don't think it's logical that we introduce different criteria. So it will.
But if you want to define lower policy, how can you if conflict with your project level configuration?
My point is your argument that the P2P policy need another security policy doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I
Here,
use this example.
that means the P2P policy is more, secure than the product level settings. That's
Wow.
that leave the possibility,
I don't
I think for most
think this
cases you can keep
assumption.
consistent with the product level, but if you want to preheat image to your part of your environment and they may require the more secure policy, then you can use this capability to to increase the the settings, right? To increase the security settings.
So
Yeah,
Steven,
I
You
this
can
understand.
criteria will overwrite the project setting? Is that
no
always be
project
true?
level project configuration will override settings defined in the policy if they have conflict.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
So
yeah,
you
we
mean
can
that
I
say
if
think
that.
the
I
most
configure security policy in the project level, so even I
Well, I
check
think
this box and the settings value are all meaningless?
it should be the higher of the two, right? Like if
yeah
it's not necessarily
here
always the project, it's the higher of the two, right? If the
Well,
project
it's
is more
very,
for
strict,
I
for
agree
for
with Daniel. It's
like,
very, it's very misleading. So
Yeah.
for
how
example,
should I know?
in the product level, you allow a media severity vulnerability artifact, right? Pulled, right? But here, the I require no vulnerability severity of high or critical. That means that the artifact follow the product
Understand
level
the
configuration. That artifact
implementation.
can be put, but that artifact cannot be preheated.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
the difference.
I think we understand this implementation and this idea. The point is, I don't think this idea makes sense.
So what's the reason of you think it does not make sense?
Yeah, because
I still
the,
don't
the assumption
understand.
the assumption is that you think your P2P network may require different security policy, but this policy doesn't always higher than project level setting. You
Yeah.
are assuming that it's always higher. It's wrong.
well, it's not always higher.
Yeah, it's not always higher. I mean, as long as we don't introduce a complete, replication of this security policy, you don't cover all scenarios. So why don't we just let it reuse the project
No,
level
I
setting?
think it should be here, because if you use a lower, your pulling action will be prevented by your product level configuration. So here we don't need a bypass, bypass operation,
I
right?
don't think you. I think Alex understands my argument.
Yeah, so
Because
yeah, so let me chime in as well. I kind of agree, like, adding multiple policies where the criteria could be different, I think will only confuse users. I mean, our policy, whether replication or pulling images directly from Harbor or P2P, should be the same. If we don't allow an image to be replicated because it's not signed, or we don't allow an image to be replicated because it doesn't meet the vulnerability, or we don't allow an image to be pulled because of a vulnerability stage, it should be the same across the board. Like our policy, like if you can't pull an image directly from Harbor, you should not be able to pull an image from P2P policy, and it should be from P2P, and it should be one unified way of doing that.
So,
But
I
have some concern because
we,
replication is the old feature. At that time, we do not consider such new conditions. But now P2P, we have the capability to support such. Actually, the replication should introduce the the same condition here.
So let me walk you through a scenario, Stephen. Today, if you try to let's say you create a project in Harbor and you say, I don't want any image with vulnerability higher than high to be posted. And we probably need to take this discussion offline as well, but let me just run this through really quickly. If you say that your image cannot be pulled if it has higher vulnerability, and let's say you have an image that has highest severity, that image will not be replicated, correct? because it doesn't meet the vulnerability threshold. Isn't that correct, Daniel and Steven?
Mhm.
Yes.
And I cannot also pull that image because I can't, it doesn't meet the vulnerability policy. So in that case, you as the operator of Harbor made the conscious choice saying, I don't want anybody to get access to that image. Why should the P2P policy be different? Where the image goes and lands on another provider somewhere else outside Harbor, where we don't own the policy around how it gets pulled or who pulls it. Like, once it goes to the P2P provider, we lost control over enforcing the policy of Harbor. So why should we ever allow it? Basically,
So I
what I'm
think
saying,
the
have a single policy for everything. Go ahead, Alex.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. I think the P2P allows you to be more more strict, right? So if you had configured something in the project settings that said nothing higher than highest, for example, then you can still allow the pulling in images with severities of medium criticality or high. But then in the P2P provider policy, we can configure that to be more strict, right? So
Yeah.
you can block more images from being pulled to the P2P provider. So I think when we were discussing this feature, someone had brought it up that they want that flexibility to be able to configure it at the P2P provider level. So
But you're not
Yeah,
really
I
making
think
it but Alex, but I don't think you're really making it more strict because there's a whitelist. For example, the admin add CVE123 to the whitelist, but in my P2P policy, I don't want it in the whitelist. You cannot do that.
no.
so I don't know how the
I
whitelist is
strongly
placed into
disagree
this.
with Daniel's side. I don't. First, project level configuration
Folks, since
is the project level for the whole project, right?
can we take this offline in Slack as well as in private discussions? If anyone else is interested in being part of this discussion, please let Stephen Joe know. That way he will involve you. But let's set up another meeting for this. I think it's worthwhile to have a dedicated meeting. That way we don't keep everybody on the call.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree. So I think we can discuss this offline. So
Okay.
So thank you,
that's
Steve,
all the
for
demo.
that.
Yeah.
Steven, do you want to introduce other contributor together with work with us?
Oh,
The name, yeah.
sorry. Give me a minute. Yeah, I needed to, sex to the contributor. This feature is, contributed by the P2P work group. We have contributor from Frank Kong from Tencent Cloud, Chen Yu Zhang from Alado Cloud, Mingming Pei from NetEase, and you have from Dragonfly team, and Shijun from VMware for UI development, and Alex for PM, and Yiran from Uber provide some suggestions, advice. So that's all the contributor of this feature. Great sex.
Steven, are you sharing the
Thanks
slides? I didn't see the.
Oh, sorry. It's weird.
No problem.
This one. Sorry.
Okay,
Yeah, this
cool.
feature is contributed by the P2P work group. Yeah, from different companies and from different projects. Frank from Tencent Cloud, Chen Yu from Alado Cloud, Ling Queyun. Yeah, Mingming Pei from NetEase, Yuhai from Dragonfly team, Shijun from VMware for UI development, and me and Alex. And we have Yiran Wang from Uber character maintainer. We got some advice from Yiran. So those are
Great work,
the
everybody.
contributors.
This is amazing. Great work.
Thank you. So that's all my content, Alex.
Thank you, Stephen, for the presentation, for the demo, and thanks to everyone who helped on this feature. Does anyone have any other comments or questions, and we can take it offline for the issue that we were talking about. So
Please, Stephen, Joe, please upload your slides to the community repo as well, so it can be linked from the notes.
Yeah, okay.
are you going to talk about this in the Harvard deep dive session? Steven?
Yeah, we mentioned this feature.
Okay. So what else are you going to talk about on the deep dive? Can you give us a preview?
Yeah, first we update the community status, and Daniel will introduce the key features in the past 2.0, and continue to introduce the anchor features introduced in our upcoming 2.1 release. And I will talk about some community feature like a P2P and the extended artifact processor from Cycloud. And also one slide talk about our other features in the roadmap. So that's all the content.
Awesome. All right, guys, any other questions, comments, things you want to share? We have a couple of minutes left. If not, we can just end early, get 5 minutes back.
Thank
Bye,
you,
everybody.
Alex. Thank you,
Have a
Steven.
great day.
Bye.
Thanks for attending. Bye-bye.
Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.